I'll speak briefly and maybe we can have a more of an interaction rather than a long speech by me. But basically, first of all, let me congratulate many of you who have just cleared the selection process. I know it's an arduous process, and so a big congratulations to all of you. It's the first step in a long, long journey. But when we think about joining the civil service and think about what this journey lies ahead, I think what I will do is give you a flavor of what could be the potential changes that we may be carrying out over the next few years. What is the role of the, can you please stop this? Thank you. What is the potential role of the civil service into the next 25 odd years that you will be having as much of your career? And the reason I am making this point is that the role of the civil service has dramatically changed over the last 25 years. And this has happened in the context of big reforms that were done over the last 25 years. Since 1991, so more than 25 years, about 30 years, as the role of the Indian state itself has changed. Till 1991, the role of the Indian state was that of a nanny state. The state basically told you how to live your life, or how businesses were supposed to behave themselves, where from the commanding heights of the system, the nanny state decided how resources were to be allocated and so on and so forth. Now that system broke down in the early 90s, and since then essentially the last 3 decades of reforms have essentially been about withdrawing the Indian state from doing the things it should not do. So almost all the reforms we have done over the last 3 decades is about that withdrawal. So the word reform and liberalization essentially meant the same thing. There were exceptions to that, but broadly that was the thrust of what we were trying to do. So opening up the economy, various sectors were opened up, permits and licenses were moved, the private sector was given a much bigger role. The role of the state became much more about regulating, providing the framework for this activity to happen, rather than for the state itself to deliver the service. That process is not yet ended. But the next 25 years is really going to be about getting the Indian state to do the things it should do. So there are many things the Indian state should be doing and is not delivering. And that is what, in many ways, your sort of generation will have to do. To provide the things the Indian state do, whether it's delivery of justice, or basic infrastructure, or safety nets, and so on. So some part of that work is beginning to happen now. Whether it's particularly building out infrastructure, for example, we have seen a major fillip in the last few years in terms of building out infrastructure. So that is something that will continue. But many of the other things that the Indian state needs to do will also have to now be taken seriously. The most important that I believe in, which you probably will have a lesser role to play, will have to be judicial reform. The enforcement of contracts and of justice, delivery of justice is perhaps the single biggest failure right now in the Indian state. I have argued this in many, many forums that judicial reforms is number one in. But number 2 will be administrative reforms. The Indian state, bureaucracy, civil service, the entire process of administration is simply not fit for purpose for this next generation of services that the Indian state needs to deliver. And therefore, there will be a lot of reform. Now, do not think that just because you are joining it right now that this will all get done by my generation. It won't. Many of the reforms that I am carrying out today were reforms that my parents' generation started in the 1990s. So just because we are going to start those reforms today and you are a generation younger, remember you will still be doing these reforms a generation from now. So please understand the logic of why we are doing it so that you will appreciate what we are attempting to do. So here are a few pointers, and I'm happy to discuss them with you, and there are many others here who may also want to discuss them. First of all, it is a misnomer that the Indian civil service and administration is way too big. In fact, the Indian bureaucracy for the size of country we have is actually quite small. The problem is that it's in the wrong place. Because of the legacy of what it was asked to do during colonial or during the socialist period, most of the administration is still in the wrong place and therefore not capable of delivering the things it should be doing. India, ironically, needs more judges, it needs more policemen, it needs more patent officers. You'll be surprised to know that India, given its, we are now hoping to become, or we have just about become the fifth largest economy in the world, we have only 800 patent officers for this whole country. We need to have at least 4,000. The number of policemen per capita we have is one of the lowest in the world. But the problem is we don't want more and more people with sticks standing in the corner. That's not the kind of policemen we want. We want policemen who can look at cybercrime, who have the capability of, looking at DNA testing. The kinds of resources we need are in the wrong place. So simply expanding today's bureaucracy is not going to help the case. So this is an important part of what you need to think about. This extends to the following problem we had, which is that of flexibility. Why is it that we do not, we can all see this. There are many luminaries on the stage and some downstairs. We can all see this. Why doesn't it easily get changed? The reason is that the logic of administration is such that simply changing direction is not so easy. I'm sure you keep hearing the term that the civil service and the bureaucracy is the steel frame of India. But the same imagery can be deployed in another way. A steel frame is also a cage. It's a rigid cage, and in some ways this cage is what is holding back India today. So we need a much more flexible approach to things, and I'm going to illustrate this for you. One of the things I do is to go through, take a comb through the administrative structure and look at all the autonomous bodies that there are in the central government. And I have discovered about 850 autonomous bodies in the central government alone. There may be more. This is the number I have discovered, and I'm ignoring here attached offices and other things inside the normal ministry. These are autonomous bodies, and by the way, some of these autonomous bodies have branches also. So 850 is the lower bound of the numbers. And I have not yet been able to quite figure out what about 300 of them do. Now, it's quite likely that many of them, when they came into existence, did have a purpose. But because we keep accumulating these bodies and do not shut them down or redeploy them or merge them, what happens is we keep accumulating them. And many of these 800 odd institutions have their headquarters in Delhi. Some of them have large, several acres of land in the middle of the national capital. But nobody is quite clear, including the minister or the secretaries of the ministries under which they fall, is what these institutions actually do. And yet, and in fact, you will hear nothing about them, and the only reason you know they exist is because if you go through the budget documents in detail, you'll find them. Now, shutting them down or redeploying them is a very important thing that we need to be able to do. And I can assure you that 30 years, 35 years from now, when you are running those ministries, you will still be finding many of these people. And it's quite possible the ones we are creating today, you will make the same comments about them then. The importance is that we are not emotional about this. We should be willing to do this. Because as I said, this mental image of a steel frame is itself extremely problematic. We've got to be much more flexible, unemotional about this, and keep changing along the way so that we can redeploy resources all along the way. And much of that will happen in your lifetime. We are already experimenting with this in many ways. For example, we have made it much more fluid. For example, posting between posts. Earlier on, there used to be this idea that certain post was from a particular service and so on. Beyond a certain level, we have increasingly diluted that. Why have we done that? Because precisely in order to allow for this fluidity. The same thing we want to do is to bring in talent from outside, and it's fair that some of the people who are working in the civil service after a certain point should be able to go out and come back in. I think this fluidity is an important part how you need to begin to think about the civil service as it will exist in your lifetime. This is important. Now, since I'm talking about fluidity, since I'm talking about allowing new institutions to appear and disappear, sort of a view of creative destruction, it does require us then to think of the civil service in a very different way than what we have done today. And we are beginning to introduce these things even into the very rigid hierarchical systems like the military service. You may have heard of the Agnini scheme. There has been some unhappiness about it in some quarters. The fact of the matter is, if the military, which is a far more hierarchical and rigid organization than the bureaucracy, can embrace something as radical as this, then I think the civil service itself needs to begin thinking very actively about how this will perform into the future, how the reskilling will be done, how new talent will be brought in, how hierarchies will be dissolved. You cannot have meetings in the future in the way meetings are held today, which is that there is this long table with secretaries sitting in the front, all the additional secretaries sitting in order of their rank, then the joint secretaries sitting in order of their rank, and the last guy sitting in the end is the only chap who knows something about the subject but never gets a chance to speak. That sort of meeting has got to be something of the past. Because we need information flows, we need knowledge to flow, we cannot have such systems anymore. I know that it may sound a little bit of a harsh thing to be talking about on the day you're celebrating your selection, and speeches in these occasions tend to be quite congratulatory. But I think it is important you hear this right up front, because when we talk about the civil service, the purpose of the civil service is serving the country. If that is what it is for, then you need to hear right up front what the country needs so that your expectations and aims and goals are aligned to that. You understand why it is what we are doing, the way we are doing it. Because when you reach and stand here on the podium here in 30 years' time, hopefully you will be talking about what the next generation is going to do. Many of the changes that we may have done will have by that time become outdated, and you hopefully will be thinking about the next generation of changes. So the idea here is, and I'm going to stop here, is to, in a sense, pass on a baton that may not seem to be of great use to you today, but that baton has now been passed on to you. At least in terms of thinking of the changes that need to happen. Many of the changes that I am now instituting were things that I was thinking about 20, 30 years ago when I was at university. I, of course, did not join the civil service like you. I went and came back in after having a career in financial markets. But they were issues I was thinking about 20, 25 years ago. So when I'm participating in something like the privatization of Air India, I was thinking about that 25 years ago. When I was thinking about labor law changes, I was thinking about it 25 years ago. I've now had an opportunity to do many of those changes. Many of the things you think are wrong and should be changes into the future are changes hopefully you're thinking about today. Thank you very much.